Welcome back to the Boys in Motion podcast. I'm Andrew, here with Brian and Tyler, and today's episode is all about crushing your first century ride without bonking, blowing up, or being that guy who holds back the pain train. We've got the tips for the group rolling with the chat pack and some spicy takes for the hammerheads jumping in on that pain train.
Super excited for this episode. We're dropping it 1 week before the 2025 BIM ride. So if you're joining us for the 2-day adventure, this is your ride Bible. But if you're not, and you're just somebody who loves riding bikes or just getting into cycling, this is also an essential guide to get you through the distance. So if it's your first 100K or you're stacking back-to-back 180s with the pain train, we'll cover how to prep, what to pack, how to ride with a group, and how to suffer in style.
I mean, I still remember my first century ride a short couple years ago. Zero clue how drafting worked, brought one nice Cliff Bar, and forgot all my sunscreen. Had those nice tan lines going. What a rookie mistake. This episode, it will be your cheat code to avoiding those disasters and actually enjoying your first century and maybe doing much more.
That's great. So let's dive right in. So pre-ride prep, it's essential. Like a century ride is nothing to scoff at. This is a long endeavor. It's going to take 3 to 5 hours to complete 100K based on the speed you're going. And so before diving into that first 3-digit ride, I recommend that you build up some volume over the course of a couple weeks out, even some months out if you really want to tackle that with speed. So by this point, when the episode's released, if you're a week out, you should have already bagged a ride that was like 60 to 80 kilometers. But if not, no worries. You can get 100K on day one and then keep that momentum going into day two.
Yeah, I know for people that aren't biking all through the winter on those indoor trainers, with the timing of the ride, it can sometimes be a little hard to do a ton of bike training leading up, but getting a couple weekend rides. I know this past weekend I went out with a couple of members of the chat pack just to get some nice, long, steady kilometers in, and I'm actually going out this coming weekend with a member of the pain train for a nice ride. So even though I'm a part of the chat pack, I like a little bit of pain here and there just to get ready to be able to push that pace on during that big ride.
I love it. How was your ride with Ian and Chris last weekend?
It was good. Yeah, I was impressed by both of them. Were nice, consistent. We did a little bit of going in a pace line when we were on kind of more of a straightaway where we weren't on the shared trail. So we did a little bit of that work where I was kind of in the front most of the time, but kind of would pull off and kind of give them a little bit just to kind of get the feel of rotating. So yeah, it was good. We averaged about like 22, 23 kilometers per hour, and that was with, a bunch of stops and being on a recreational trail. So I think the chat pack members are ready to ride.
That's awesome. I've been seeing some of like the training rides that other chat pack members have gone on, and it's all been in that like sweet spot of around like 22 to 24. So I think there's a good group that's going to be rolling together and all happy at that pace, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, and I think another thing to wrap up the pre-race prep is, make sure your bike's all good to go. So make sure obviously everything's tightened up, everything's clean. You have some spare tools, tires, tubes, just in case anything happens on that long ride. Obviously, we'll be with the big pack in our upcoming ride, but you never want to be the one left out and shafted without all your tools. So, always get prepped as you're self-sufficient. So you could replace your own your own tube if you have a puncture. You have some sort of toolkit to tighten up any bolts, and you're good to go.
Tyler, I love it. You're jumping 15 minutes ahead in the episode with that insight, and we'll dive into kind of what everybody is expected to bring.
I'm just scared
in
of
a
a
few
flat.
points.
I'm just really scared of a flat.
Flats happen, and like you say, self-sustained is the way. Just like a heads up to all the riders, like yes, these are big numbers if you've never ridden them before, but each group is a no drop group, and I think that's essential even if you're not joining our ride. For those first big rides that you go on, make sure they're no drop. You don't want to be out stranded or feel like if you aren't able to keep up with the pace that you're just going to be alone for the next 60 kilometers. That's no fun for everybody. So like Andrew and myself and Tyler, we've committed that the groups that we're leading as individuals will stay as groups together throughout the day. So if somebody does get a flat, we're not going to abandon you and just try to push the pace. We're going to repair that with you. And Andrew and myself, I can't speak for you, Tyler, but I know Andrew does. We've got all the tools to replace a flat. But for every rider, you should at least have a tube.
Yeah, you definitely want a tube. And I know I have a hand pump and an adapter for a CO2 cartridge, but even some spare CO2 cartridges would be a great idea because I'll be bringing a few in the pack. But if we, start going over nails, I won't have enough to be pumping up all the tires. But I am knocking on wood. In the history of the BIM ride, our gear and mechanical record is clean. So I'm hoping we keep it that way this year as well.
Yeah. Now, an essential part of keeping that mechanical record at 100% is communication. So let's jump into group riding 101. And I think the first thing is how to communicate with others that you're riding with. This is the number one point, I think, to make sure that everybody has a good day, everybody has a fun day, everybody has a safe day, and everybody has a day that you get to know the people around you, but you're doing that in style as a team. So I think the keys there are to be vocal. One, group rides, if you've never gone on one before or if you're used to them, you need to be loud when you communicate. So if you're going to say something and you want somebody to hear it, you need to be very, very loud. Just last week, I was riding with Mike, Adam, and Mark, and Mike was basically right beside me off my shoulder, and he was coming up the inside, and he just sort of like like he was loud enough. He just at a conversational level said like coming up on the inside. And I just heard something. I didn't hear what he said. And it was just he and I riding together on a descent at that point. Had he yelled that, I would have known immediately and it would have just been safer for both of us. And that's somebody who has done all the century rides in the world. And even for us, it's something just to be reminded of. If you're going to speak, yell it.
Yeah, and I think that point goes for within your group, but even with people, like people in the surroundings. I know for this specific ride, we'll be doing some shared trail riding. So you definitely want to be communicating if you're passing pedestrians, other bikers. Be loud, make sure they know where you're going and be clear of like, I'm passing on your left so that they know what you're doing and they're not as you're whipping by jumping in front of your bike or something. So you just want to make sure that people know what you're doing so that they can plan ahead and kind of make decisions.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tyler, I want to ask you, because you're super experienced with the riding, what are some of the key hand signals and things that you will hear in a group riding together? Hear and see.
Yeah, I guess people like, well, as cyclists, we all have the typical hand or vocal signals, just so it stays similar across the board for everybody. But you got your hand signals obviously for turning and stuff like that, but also like pointing out if there's potholes on your left or right, making hand signals either going towards the inside or moving towards the outside to avoid any potholes. A lot of vocals, again, being super loud, vocal, yelling car up or back. If you hear a car coming, if you're the guy on the back of the peloton, if you see something, you're the front couple people and you see something coming up, either an obstacle, sometimes there's those pylons splitting the lanes and stuff like that. So obstacle coming up. If you're stopping, you're yelling stopping or slowing, as well as the hand signal. If there's wonky asphalt or gravel, you could also yell gravel. That helps as well, just so nobody slams on the brakes. And we're in a tight peloton, so any sort of sudden movement or slowing or stopping can be actually very dangerous for the rest of the group. So you just gotta be mindful and remember that you're with a bunch of other people. So just making sure you're kind of working as one.
Yeah, and I think to hammer home, like you mentioned it a little bit, which was the lead riders. So if you're at the front of the group, you are responsible for everybody behind you. And no matter where you are in the group, you're responsible for everybody behind and ahead of you as well. But the lead row of riders in the group, if it's just one, maybe it's two, maybe it's three, but you are responsible for protecting everybody's wheels behind you from any sort of garbage holes, whatever it might be. You need to be super attentive and looking far down the road to make sure that you're protecting everybody. And then around turns, you sort of need to guide the group in terms of how much speed they can take. You, again, want to be predictable there and look for gravel on those turns. That can slip out anybody's wheel at any point. So if there's gravel, you're going to be taking that extra cautiously and really yell that out. The last thing, and this will happen in all of the groups that are riding the BIM ride, and any group ride that you go on, you're going to hit intersections. And the responsibility of those lead riders in that is to safely bring the group through that intersection. So you want to be looking both ways and calling both ways. So usually it's like good, good, or clear, clear, just making sure that everybody knows that it's good on both sides. But as a rider in that pack as well, make sure you're also looking and confirming. So if as you're going through and you see there's nobody, clear, clear. If there's a car, immediately yell that car and bring it down slowly and safely to a full stop.
Yeah, that's very true. Through intersections, if you're one of the front riders, you kind of got to pretend you have like, a little snake tail behind you that lasts, definitely a few meters behind you. So, meaning it's clear for you doesn't mean it's clear for the guys in the back. So really watch for that. And like Brian was saying, reiterating, if you're down the line, just repeating that command, clear, 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 making sure it's clear, 10 people deep. So just making sure we're not shafting anyone over with the frog jumper and getting someone squished at the end.
Now we know it's great to communicate, and this was definitely a theme of the past BIM ride, and being the newbie group rider of the group, I'm definitely guilty of this because I like to inspect things, and when there's a good bump, I like calling it out. So I'm just there being a bump inspector all ride long, but you definitely don't want to do over communication for bumps. Only do it when it's more of a meaningful bump or something that could pose a risk for someone that's behind you. But what do you guys think? What is too much communication when it comes to bumps?
So I think there's two things. Too much over communication is one when it's inevitable and it's not going to like buck you off your bike or like pop a tire. So for example, if there's like a bridge and there's like that little like lip of the bridge and you're going to go over it and everybody will go over it and it'll be okay, that's one place where I might not communicate quite as much. And then another thing would just be like when the road is kind of getting like a little bit shafty and just like broken up a tiny bit where it's rumbling and that sort of thing. That's when there's the most risk that there might be a huge pothole that you need to avoid. And so that's where I would even like scale back a little bit because everybody's expectations are that the road is a little uneven. And that's when like if you're going to call bump, it needs to be something that's like far beyond the regular conditions of that section of road.
Yeah, that's explained perfectly, I think. And I think it we'll find our groove as we get along throughout the day. I feel like it's like that with most group rides, riding with different people. You kind of know what the threshold is, let's call it, or the vibe of the group. But I'm definitely one to be on the less vocal on the bump side of things. I just roll with the punches and see and kind of am very vigilant on what's right in front of me. But yeah, just making sure you don't overcall those like little little mini bumps out. Like you're going to be used to getting that butt massage. You're on a saddle, so you're going to get those bumps. But yeah, just avoiding those massive potholes, or making sure you're going to the left or the right. Just not yelling bump every 5 seconds. That was real fun.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that like if you're in like a regular wind and the best and most efficient way is to like follow that draft perfectly in front of you, follow the rider's wheels right in front of you. Like that's the safest thing to do, and just trust that like they're doing the same to the person ahead of you and the other, and vice, like going all the way up the chain. Because if you're following the wheels of the person right at the front, you're probably going to be most protected at that instance because they have full vision on the road. So I always look up at people's shoulders and just try to match it. Now, if there's a crosswind, that'll change things because I'll need to be off on the shoulder of them a little bit, but then I can see the road perfectly. So I think no matter where you are, just like trust the people around you to a certain extent and communicate. Like you say, a group is something that's dynamic. You learn together right at the start of the ride, and as the day goes on, it kind of changes how you communicate, how you're drafting, all of that. And so just like learn and chat with people around you so that everybody's on the same page. Because the worst thing that can happen in a group ride is there's like two separate groups working against each other where you're not like all just working as one to reach that goal together.
Yeah, and with kind of like that working as a group, you're really trying to, because like you're better as a whole. Let's talk a little bit about bike etiquette, because I think there is a few little things that will really go a long way as far as working as that group. And I think the one big thing, and that kind of you guys have told me, is just that consistency of your pedal stroke. I know, Tyler, you like to push that pace. You like to try to push us in that pain cave. But if you're thinking in the group's best interest, going nice, consistent, this is, as you guys have mentioned many times, if you have power, this is a time to use it and just stick to that number. But you want to stay consistent, not going way slower or faster, because that person in the back is just trying to keep that same speed that you are. And if you're doing anything out of the ordinary and not communicating that, they have no idea what you're doing behind you. What do you guys think are some big etiquette things that really go a long way in a group ride?
Yeah, I think that main thing that I definitely have to work on is that no sudden movement or power surges for no reason. Getting the zoomies out there is quite easy and quite exciting, but you just got to maintain that constant flow, and you got to gauge those uphills and the downhills compared to the people behind you as well. Another big etiquette there is just on the part of safety, nothing to impede your hearing or your vision. Even make sure you have the right tint of glasses for the day. You don't want, if it's a gloomy day out there, you don't want to have too dark of a shade, and it kind of messes with your vision, and no earplugs or music as well. You don't want to be spaced out in your own world there when you can't hear the vocals or you can't hear what anybody's saying.
Yeah, to add to that point, which all of that I agree with Tyler, the other thing is no sudden braking, right? Like you as somebody in the peloton or the group can't jam on the brakes, because it's going to be the worst thing for you, because that person behind you is coming crashing right into your bike and right into you, and you will both go down. So part of your responsibility as a rider is, like you said, no sudden movements. So that means like no veering to the right or the left, except like if it's like a sudden death pothole that you need to dodge, but always be mindful of the people around you. The other thing is don't overlap wheels unless you really have a good dynamic with that rider around you. So that means like keep enough space between your wheel and the wheel in front of you, and your responsibility is, again, to protect your front wheel. If you can protect your front wheel, you're making the ride safer for everybody. And the whole goal of the BIM ride and most group rides is to protect the whole group and make the whole group better. So that means drafting, pacing, etiquette. You need to be mindful of it all.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little bit about the different ride styles for this specific ride. So we have two different groups, the pain train, who will be really pushing that pace, and the chat pack. I think there will be some things that are a little bit more similar, but then I think, especially in that pain train, there will be very specific things to make sure that that ride goes as effectively as possible. So kind of what are some of those things in that pain train that people are going to want to be thinking about as you're riding in that group?
So the right off the top is like the drafting effect of the pain train is going to be greater than that of the chat pack because we are going at such high speeds. So those that are in the back, like all the way in the back, will be saving upwards of 30% of the effort, which means we can actually support riders who are maybe less strong than the group average by taking equitable time at the front. And I think this is something that takes time for riders to learn, whether you're at the like top of that group or the bottom of that group, is in order to make that group as fast as possible, there should be some people who are spending way less time in the front than the strongest people, and vice versa. So it's the responsibility of the whole group to identify who those strong players are, who those weak players are, and at the end of the day, that can change through such a big ride. Like there are times in a 100K ride where I'm feeling bad, despite being one of the stronger riders, where somebody like, well, I don't want to name names, but like there's been points in rides where like Adam will take the front, who often the king of bonk, but he can also go and rip it at like 40K an hour while I'm not feeling as good after, for example, stopping for a meal. That happened already during a ride that we went on. And so I think it's just about learning about how to be an equitable group in terms of sharing the effort at the front rather than an equal group of sharing at the front, because one of the worst things that happens is somebody goes out way too hard, wants to pull at the front, wants to be that big dog, and then they're holding the rest of the group back in the latter half of that ride, which isn't fun for anybody. It sucks to be that person who's in total pain at the end, and it also sucks for the rest of the group who needs to hold the other person's hand and nurse them back to health.
100%. And in the same breath, you have to identify the equitable in the ride and try to save as many legs as possible for basically the longest time possible, right? Like you're trying to keep everyone as fresh as their ability can take them for as long as possible, so it's a joyful ride for everyone. So that's what I'm also excited about.
Yeah, and it's important for just like everybody in that group to push the ego aside and just understand what their capacity is at any given moment, and go for the group, optimize for the group. I mean, look at the top of the sport. Poggi will not pull for 170 kilometers of a race just so he can blast off the last 5 kilometers of a climb and win the race. And it's the same thing that we're doing here, but just for everybody to cross that at a maximized speed. So I think that's the number one key difference of like when we get into the nitty gritty of what the difference between the pain train and the chat pack will be, is we're trying to optimize and maximize for speed, and that requires some balancing.
Yeah, we're in the chat pack strictly optimizing for the chat, and we will find the optimal chat formation about 20K in, I believe, is when we'll reach that, our final form. But let's move right on.
The flying V.
The flying V. I do hear that's good. I do hear that is an optimal chat formation. But let's move on to talk a little bit about the gear and nutrition checklist for doing your first 100K century ride, and make sure that you're all set up. And let's start with kind of the obvious things. And of course, that is having a road bike. And I'll put big emphasis on that in good working order. So make sure before the ride that you've tested things, you've tested your brakes, your shifting, make sure everything is operating smoothly. And then just a few safety things. Your helmet, of course, crashes do happen. So having a good helmet that hasn't been in any previous crashes or anything like that, or some, helmet that's degraded, that's just been sitting in the garage. And then glasses. This is definitely a big piece of safety gear. It protects you from the wind, from any debris. And I know I've been on some rides where I forgot them and you're just crying the whole time because the wind's just slapping you in the face. So a nice pair of sunglasses, or just glasses if it's darker, is essential. And Tyler, I know you were jumping at the bit to tell us about some of that kit that you're rocking. So tell us about that.
Cycling kit, one of the most important things. You got to stay fashionable. You got to stay funky. out there. You gotta be also comfortable, right? We're doing a multiple hour ride, so take out those comfiest bib shorts you got, and if you don't have, I'm just saying it right now, if you don't have cycling shorts with padding, go get some. That will be tough on, let's say, the later part of day one, and day two, forget about it. I mean, I'm in shambles for day two already with the comfiest bib shorts I could find, and the nice, breezy, beautiful cycling jersey. So even with that, it's a tough seat out there. So yeah, just make sure you wear the right type of gear for what you're doing, all the way down to the socks and the shoes. So you don't want to have these clunker shoes and not tight, or sorry, too tight is a big thing for circulation. And also people have preferences with socks. So I know exactly what pairs of socks I'm already going to be wearing for both days. Got to keep it funky, but also got to keep it fresh. So you got to make sure you're
I know what socks I'm wearing. Aero socks, baby, and nothing else.
Lycra.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that's fantastic. The other thing is if there's rain on the day, no matter when you're riding, just like make sure that you're taking a look at the weather. We're going to be out there for a long time as well. You've got pockets in the back of your jersey. You got to fill them with carbs, and you got to fill them with things that get you flexible. So whether that's your gear and equipment, spare tube is mandatory for everybody, and I would recommend everybody get a CO2 cartridge, because within each group we will have people who have the cartridge adapters. So if you have a spare tube and a CO2 cartridge, you're good on that sort of like popping a tire. We'll be able to handle everything else from that. Do you guys want to chat about food now, or is there anything we forgot?
I think the only one thing that I do want to give a mention to, you mentioned rain. But another thing is we'll be out there for a long time. And even if it's not that hot and sunny of a day, bring that sunscreen and bring enough to reapply, because it doesn't take much. And with you just sitting there with your arms and your neck out in the sun all day, it is not hard to get a very silly bike jersey tan. So do try to avoid that. But yeah, I think that's good. And I think we can hand it off to the chief nutrition boy of the group to tell a bit of how to crush that fueling plan.
This will give us brownie points. I'm going to say the sunscreen tidbit will give us brownie points with the moms out there. So yes, make sure you bring your sunscreen and reapply.
Yeah, and on the sunscreen point, it's worth coordinating with other people as well, because not everybody needs to carry a full tube of sunscreen. You can usually like coordinate with 2 or 3 other riders so that one of you is carrying a few of those different things. That way you can just like maximize for everybody. Now, Andrew, you mentioned the king of carbs. Who is that? Is that Tyler, myself, or you? Because I feel like we're all carby barbies.
Well, I think we're all very good at taking down carbs, but I think you are the one that loves experimenting with the different kind of carbs and how to do it nice and cheap and effectively, but also smashing those carbs. And you love just sitting on the bike and having a meal. So yeah. Tell the listeners how they can go about it.
You're spot on. So what I want to start with is a few rules of thumbs in terms of like how much you should be consuming. We'll talk about timing during the ride, and then I'll actually run through an example of what my likely setup will be during the ride itself. So rule of thumb is you basically want 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour while you're riding. Now, if you don't know how much that is, it's probably more than you think. 60 grams of carbs, so 75, which is right in the middle there, 75 grams of carbs is 3 gels an hour. So that's 1 every 20 minutes if you're using like standard gels. But that's not necessarily the best way to go about this, because the other key that you need to be consuming is hydration. So you need to stay on top of your hydration. And this can be, depending on the day, anywhere from like 400 mils to a liter an hour plus, depending on how hot it is. I looked right before this at the expected weather for this specific ride that we're talking about. It'll be around 20 degrees, so not crazy hot, but also not cold. So I'm going to be trying to do probably about 750 to 900 mils an hour. And then you also want to be taking some electrolytes. So that is generally about 500 milligrams to upwards of 1,000 milligrams per hour of sodium. And that would be generally in your drink mix or through some sort of pill. So during the ride, I fuel, and I have a timer on my bike computer every single 20-minute. Every time I hit 20 minutes, boom, I get a notification to fuel up. So I'm sipping water, I'm taking gel, and I'm maybe also hitting a carb mix. And this is the secret here. You want to have a mix of solid foods and gels and also liquid carbs, so something in your water bottle. You basically want to be drinking consistently, especially early on. And if you ever feel thirsty during your ride, you screwed up, because if you feel thirsty, you're already way behind on your hydration. So you always want to be kind of forcing water and forcing carb mix. So my setup on my bike is I have one bottle of water, and it's always just water. That's all. And then I have one bottle which has carbs in it. I like just plain old Kool-Aid mix. And then I do half a scoop. I've adjusted it to half a scoop of pool water, which is around, I would say, like 600 milligrams of sodium. So that kind of gives you a clue. And I'm trying to finish all of that once per hour, both water bottles down once per hour. And then I'm also going to have gels, homemade gels on me. And those are about 180 grams of carbs each. So they last a long time, but I'll be trying to basically do one of those every 3 hours, so a third of a pack. So it looks like 60 grams of carbs from the gel, 30 grams of carbs from my carb mix, and a full bottle of water. And I'm going to be doing that throughout the ride consistently. And that's a challenge. You kind of need to train yourself up to that. So if you don't feel comfortable doing that, just try to push your upward limit, because you're burning so many calories and you're also losing so much water sweating on that bike.
Yeah, and I think although on the bike it's easy to get down the carbs, the calories, one thing I do find it's kind of a challenge to be reaching down for your bottles, reaching around into your jersey pockets for the gels. So that's definitely something that you want to practice a little bit, because when you are kind of moving in that peloton, you need to try to do it pretty seamlessly as you're riding, and it's not like you can take your foot off the pedals or you slow down to grab that or anything. So it is worth just like practicing a little bit, because I know the first few times that I was doing it, of like reaching back for that gel, or when you're putting it back and like fiddling with it because you think you're going to miss the pocket. So definitely worth spending a little bit of time practicing that before your big ride.
Very true. And another quick tip there that I find is, I guess we could dive into the pace line on the day, but when you're kind of drafting back on the pace line, or even in the back of the pack, that's kind of where I try to re-up. I'm fiddling around in the back, fiddling around with my water bottles, trying not to kind of disturb too much of the peloton if I'm at the front or in the middle there. But that's another quick tip, let's call it.
No, you're spot on, and I'm the same way. I'll do it when you're kind of receding back to the back, actually in the back, or like I'll actually sometimes, because we're again not racing against each other, we're trying to do it for the group, I'll try to like gap myself from the group, fuel up properly, sometimes hands off the bars, whatever, give a stretch, and then hop right back on that pace line, or just a quick sip of water or whatever right when I'm at the front. But when I'm in the middle of that group, I'm not touching anything but my bars, just to remain safe. So I talked about what I consume during, but you can actually do a little bit of pre-ride fueling. And Andrew, you're the king of this, because it's basically the same thing as marathons, but what do you think you'll be doing the morning of a ride?
This is just, rinse and repeat from marathons, just that nice pre-endurance activity carb load. So you're kind of looking at that 2 to 3 hour time frame to get about 100 to 150 grams of carbs. Whatever you normally do on your long runs, your long rides, your long activities, I tend to love just simple oatmeals, a bowl of oatmeal and maple syrup. Maybe you'd want to do banana, peanut butter, and toast. And then as you go in to that activity, you want to just be sipping on some electrolyte drink about 30 minutes before going out. As part of that carb load, I also love doing a nice healthy heaping of beets. That's the big secret, really, is just getting a nice beet drink with that oatmeal and then move into that electrolyte drink, and then maybe start on the caffeine kind of just right there pre-ride, but not necessarily quite as important for something this long.
Yeah, I love the serving of beets, or multiple servings, let's call it, pre-endurance activity. Really gives you that boost to rocket ship up those hills. So it's amazing.
Anything to rocket ship up that hill. I need the extra boost.
Yeah. So just before we leave nutrition and the fueling game plan, just like for all of those that are actually participating in the BIM ride, make sure you go out, you buy carbs, you buy electrolytes in whatever format you want. Because the one thing is, like, a single bottle of Gatorade does not give you enough carbs, does not give you enough salt to go through an hour of intense riding. That's especially true for those in the pain train, but I would call it equally true for those in the chat pack. Is like, just one bottle of Gatorade an hour, it does not suffice for the output that you'll be doing.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to Jacob from last year. I remember mid-ride when he was still pushing hard, leading the group. And then we were talking to him about, like, oh, how many carbs have you been having? And he just, like, pulled out a couple of, like, fruit snacks. And I'm here dying, having my 80 to 100 grams of carbs. And I'm like, how are you still operating, Jacob? And I'm here, my legs are about to fall off. So, but don't take the Jacob route, and you make sure you want to have enough carbs just in case, because there's nothing better than struggling a bit, pulling out a nice fuzzy peach or something like that and popping it in. It can bring you back from death.
And I mean, some people are just freaks like that. I guess, with time, you know how your body works. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, I would say, disclaimer, we are not scientists, but I would really recommend these numbers. Because I know I got another freak in Ottawa, Alex. He just goes up with pure water. He just pops a noon tab in, zero carb man, and he could go on forever, that guy.
Yeah, some people are built different, but don't expect you to be built different on the day if you've never tested. Okay, so for those that are actually joining the BIM ride, let's just go through a few of the highlights of what people should expect. So the number one thing is, and everybody's got that starting location, we're going to send an email as well, which may have prompted you starting this episode. You got that email, but the ride starts at 7 a.m. sharp. Be ready, be early. We hope that everybody's there by 6:45 so we can get kicked off quickly, and be fueled as well. We hope that you're already ready for at least the first 3 to 4 hours of that ride, so you have the carbs on you and that sort of thing. We hope to do rest stops basically every hour to hour and a half. I think there's one gap for the pain train that's about 60 kilometers, so that might be a little bit longer. But other than that, we'll be stopping frequently enough for refueling and grabbing some water, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and just kind of be prepared for kind of there might be headwinds on the day. We're doing a loop, so at some point, that wind is going to be in your face and is going to be, a little extra effort. But with headwinds, there will be tailwinds, and that's when you get flying. And I know on that first day, it is quite flat, so there will be a lot of nice flat sections with a little bit more climbing on that second day. I like to say it's a little extra fun because I love those climbing sections. But all in all, it's going to be a great, just fun group ride where everyone's going to be out there riding together, pushing each other, just to have either that first 100K for that chat pack or potentially first mile century for that pain train. So it should be awesome.
Oh, I'm getting fired up the more we talk about it. And another thing too, for those joining the both days, we'll have an overnight in Fort Erie. So pack your overnight bag. We'll have people bringing the bags over for that overnight. So pack light but smart. Bring what you need, but not too much. You don't want to bring your whole closet out there, but bring what you need. We'll send some more info on maybe some of those guidelines in the email beforehand. But yeah, we'll have that overnight in Fort Erie, and everybody will have a place to stay.
Awesome. So a quick chat time, I think, today, just based off the time. We have a tiny bit of a chatter that we can go through. And the first thing that I have is a hot take for you both, because this is something that I just want to reinforce to any rider who's going out for a group ride, which is if you bonk, it's your fault and your fault only, and you're ruining the ride for other people as well.
I like that.
So police the people around you so that they're not bonking and ruining the ride. So one of the things I'm committed to is when my 20-minute timer goes off during the ride, I'm going to be reminding people, and by people I mean Adam, to be drinking and taking in those carbs.
That's a shout out right there. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I agree with some spots of your statement here. I agree that it's your fault, but I don't agree that you're ruining the ride. I agree. I think it is. It adds hilariousness to the ride. It's just pure comical. I've been on that side of the pure bonk, and it's absolutely heinous. And I just think now being on the other side, hopefully for the next little while, it is just hilarious, honestly, to see people bonk, because you people come back from the dead, but it's just those pictures are gold.
You're right. You can come back from the dead, and I think that's the one thing that makes up for the dreaded bonk is with a quick little donut stop, you could get fueled up again and be ready to zoom off. The one of the reasons I say this is not actually because of anybody I ride with specifically, but because I bonked not too long ago on a ride, and it was just awful, and I felt bad for Mark, who was right next to me. But then I started telling him, dude, I'm fully bonked, like my legs aren't going. And turns out he was bonking too, because we just weren't taking in carbs and we never got to a coffee stop.
The two bonkers, and you guys were both undercover, didn't want to spill the beans first.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a great point. You're in a group, we're riding as a group, let people know how you're feeling. We're not just there to, kill each other and just push each other to the limits. I mean, we're trying to get close to that limit, but tell people how you're feeling so that, if you need those carbs, someone can pull out a quick gel for you and give you that sweet sugar to get you to that next stop. And just another thing is, for those riders that are in a group that is slightly out of their abilities, you get that drafting effect, but we chatted about it earlier on in the episode with the pace line rotation. Don't be a hero. Don't hit the front of the group, and just because the last person did, I don't know, let's say 2 minutes at the front, and you want to one up them and you go 2:30, but you are the weakest person in that peloton, that is not the move 10 kilometers into your century ride. So be conservative with that energy a little bit.
It's a recipe for a bonk right there, exactly.
Yeah, totally true. So one of the things that I do want to talk about, and I think this is a funny thing, is just your highlight from last year, just to kind of get the juices flowing on what people might be able to expect for this year. So maybe we can go around the table, share one of the highlights that we just absolutely loved from last year's ride, and hopefully the good vibes continue. Who wants to start?
Frig, I'll start it off. I'm not going to take the Adam bonking because that was just top of everything, so I'm going to leave that out of it. I really liked the sprint offs at the end. I know we're saying no drop, no sprint, but it is inevitable. The stoplight sprint offs are just immaculate. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like that's the exception. Climbs and the finishing kick, I think all bets are off. You just you send it. And I think for me, my highlight from the last one is kind of in the similar, is the couple climbs that we did. I remember right in St. Catharines as we were going in DQ, the down and up, and I remember the legs were feeling good, and I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna full send it. I pulled back a little bit, and then I just blasted up. It didn't last for the whole thing because the legs started giving, but it was fun while the legs were still there.
That was my worst memory. I was the last one up that hill.
Frig, I was a victim of Andrews. I was like, okay, I'm going to pace this steady. I was already, I was one of maybe the 3 first riders going up that hill. And I looked down at my bike computer. I'm like, okay, like 315 watts, I can do this and it won't be too hard. And then all of a sudden, the friggin' flying Goopy Express rocket shits up beside me. And he made it it was almost as far as I couldn't see him. And then 1 or 2 minutes later up that climb, he's friggin' dying because the legs are just too juiced. And I was like, okay, steady as she goes. And the turtle beat the hare on that day, but only just.
Yeah, I emptied the cylinders, but I learned my lesson because for the final sprint on that day, I remember I initiated the sprint, but I knew exactly what I was doing. I'm not the sprinter of the group. I'm gonna initiate it to get the mans a little bit excited, and then everyone just took off right in front of me.
That was well executed. You literally baited us all, and you said, "See you later."
That was the perfect lead out, honestly. He spooked me when he got that watt power down, but then I just felt Mark was ready to tear it to another level. So I think he and I just waited until we were both ready to rip it, and I totally blacked out on who won that one. So much fun though. My highlight happened not too long after that final sprint out, which was arriving at the end of day 2 for a barbecue at Mike and Kennedy's. Kennedy had a beautiful spread of food, a few nice cold pops ready for us to consume. And it was just awesome to be able to kind of kick the legs back, know that there's no day 3, and enjoy good food, good chats about all of the great memories we made on that trip last year. And I'm excited to kind of have that experience again after day 1 and then after day 2 as well. It's going to be superb. And I think we've put in a lot of effort to planning some good events, food, and whatnot all around, kind of making sure that the decompression that happens after that ride is just as blissful and as refueling for everybody as it can be.
And I just want to add one more thing. And this was another on that day 2. The day 2 was a big high, but I remember when Sil joined us and he was coming out for, I forget, maybe about 50K or so. But I remember all the boys were feeling real good on day 2 and we were cooking. I remember Sil at the beginning was taking all the lead and then we just started going. And we were putting Sil through the ringer. I think he had a great time though because he only needed to do it for 50K. But it's just a nice reminder that if there's anyone that maybe isn't able to join for 2 days or even a full day, but are in the area, join us for a little bit, especially in the chat pack. If you just want to come out for a nice casual ride for a portion of it, we'll be doing the Niagara Loop. So if you're around, we'd love to have you for a portion of it.
100%. And I guess I gotta keep it going. I love the head dunk too. Stop at Mark's place, get the head dunk in the water, and get on our way. Just too many good memories, and I can't wait to get some more memories in this year.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm sure I think it'll be our next podcast that comes out after this. We will be able to chat about all the great memories that we make this year. I'm looking forward to the debrief. I'm looking forward to all the social media posts that we'll be putting out. I'm looking forward to all the content, all the laughs, all the good experience, and hopefully no injuries, no kind of incidents. That's all we can wish for. And whether it's rain or shine, it should be a good time. So that is a wrap on today's episode. Whether you're riding with the Paint Train or the Chat Pack, or maybe in 2026 for the next BIM ride, we hope that you feel more ready today after listening to this episode. We hope you feel more stoked after listening to this episode. And I hope that some of the fueling tips I gave you will have you slightly less cramped up when we reach that 100K mark.
Very true. And who knows, maybe next year we're doing 3 days. We'll see. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, hop on our Strava club, Boys in Motion, and share this episode with everybody you know, or anybody who would like to dabble their feet in a nice century ride.
And just the weekly reminder, although we shared a lot of hot tips during this episode, we are not doctors, nutritionists, or bike techs. So always consult an expert before you make any big decisions about your body or your bike.
That's it. So keep the wheels turning, The vibe's high, and remember, the only thing better than finishing a century is doing it together. So we'll see you.